Bill, now that you've had a chance to review the film, why do you think your team committed so many penalties against Ohio State?
Well, really, to be real frank with you, Rich, we've moved on from Ohio State. We've moved on to Purdue. Hopefully, we have corrected the mistakes from that game in practice, and we'll continue to do that over the next 3 days here. But we have a big challenge for us at Purdue, and we're moved on to Purdue. We've turned the page. We're working on Purdue, and we turn the page on Monday.
Bob Flanders in Harrisburg.
Bill, you talked a little bit about Purdue yesterday. What's the bigger challenge in your mind? Kind of dealing with the size of their defensive tackle, or just getting ready for their multiple offense?
Well, both are challenges, Bob. I'll tell you, they're starting with our offense versus their defense. Their two inside tackles are they are very, very good players with Short and Gaston. These guys are active. They're big. They're strong. They're physical. They have a good-sized secondary, linebackers that are active, so we've got a big challenge ahead of us. Offensively, they're a very multiple offense. You're going to have to defend the field both horizontally and vertically. You got to do a great job on third down. So it's a big challenge for our defense. Special teams, we've got to play better on special teams than we have in the past, especially last week. And so that's what we're trying to do, is shore up some things on special teams. And again, it's a big challenge for us at Purdue.
Mark Brennan of Fight on State here with our weekly Bill O'Brien press conference wrapped, joined as usual by Greg Pickel. Greg, biggest news coming out of this is that Ohio State lost? What Ohio State lost? Penn State's already forgotten all about it.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien very clear on the fact that he wants to move on from last week and not really talk about anything that encompassed that Ohio State game. There were questions about penalties, questions about decisions and calls, and Bill O'Brien doesn't really want to go back and rehash that. He wants to look forward towards Purdue and talk about a challenging team, as he calls them, and talk about their speed and what they are going to bring to the table on Saturday. So yeah, definitely the biggest thing, other than the injuries, which we'll get to, is just the fact that there was no talk about last week. It was all moving forward and preparing for this week against Purdue.
Yeah, and he wasted no time addressing that. Rich Scarcella, the Reading Eagle, kind of asked him about what they learned off of the Purdue game, and he immediately gave his, with all due respect, or I appreciate the question, or that kind of thing, and moved right on. And Matt McGloin kind of touched on it when he talked to the media a little bit later, saying that they're not really focusing on what happened at Ohio State. I think they obviously had to learn from some of the issues there. Some of the things that were talked about today were the pressure that Ohio State was able to get on McGloin, which was kind of unique for Penn State this season. But the loudness of the crowd and how that, the home crowd, actually impacted Penn State. But I think overall, it is important for them to move on. This is a Purdue team that they should beat, but a Purdue team that if they don't play well, can grab them. So it's that old cliche that you don't want to let one team beat you twice. And I think that could be the case if they wallow too much over that loss. Let's get straight to the injury report. Kyle Carter, tight end, tight end, still day to day. That sounds like we're not going to have a really good feel for what's going to happen there until right before the game. And obviously, he's been a big time player for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Allen Robinson gave probably the best insight of the day this morning on his conference call. It's Tuesday. Of course, we're filming this. He gave insight this morning that he doesn't believe it's the case when asked if Carter would miss time on Saturday. So I think he feels pretty confident that Carter can get back out there. Bill O'Brien made very clear that he's out there every day. He's been out there every day, rather.
Yeah.
Walking through. We're filming this on Wednesday, actually. A change of plans, but
and inside, since it's a little ugly outside.
But yeah, so they both talked about the fact that Carter really wants to get out there and play. But even if he doesn't, they're able to interchange. I think maybe the most resounding statement O'Brien made today was that people need to understand that the position is interchangeable. It just depends on the personnel grouping.
Yeah, they have the F tight end and the Y tight end, and all the guys who are there practice at a different spot. So I asked him specifically, how does it impact your personnel groupings, and who are some of the people who would have to step up? And he said overall it really doesn't impact the personnel groupings because, again, they have guys, they train these players to play both spots. And he actually said he thinks that if there is a position where you're going to lose somebody, you're kind of fortunate if it's tight end because, they have Gary Gilliam, they have Lehman, they have Jesse James. They have a lot of guys who have done a lot of good things. That said, Kyle Carter's kind of a special tight end for them and does a lot of different things that some of the other guys can't do. So it will be important if they're able to get him back Elsewhere on the injury front, it sounds like they're pretty good. They're still pretty good. I don't know if am I forgetting anybody?
Ficken's quad injury would be about it. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing with Ficken, and you could address this. It sounded as if that played into why the quad injury. They didn't have him attempt that 37-yarder against Ohio State, but he was happy with the kickoffs that he did. I will tell you this: that Bill O'Brien, he clearly was not in any kind of terrible mood after dealing with a difficult loss. He had some fun joking about the speaker system here, the speakerphone. I think it was less the speakerphone than it was the actual caller's telephone. But he was joking, saying it was like Charlie Brown.
Yeah, Charlie Brown's teacher. Yeah, he was in a pretty good mood today, other than the fact that he had no interest in going back and discussing Ohio State. But yes, very good mood today. And as for Ficken, he relied on what we've heard a lot from Bill O'Brien when asked about certain plays and situations. He said he liked the call they had on 4th down, and that's why they didn't kick the 37-yard field goal. But he also sort of hinted at the fact that I don't think they're all that sure how far Ficken can kick with this leg injury. I think they may have an idea, they may not reveal it, but I don't think it's as cut and dry as you may think it is. So I think that's something that's interesting to watch going forward. Is that what's the distance Sam Ficken can kick? Is it anything under 30? Is it 35? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? And do they ever turn to another option? I think that's maybe one of the biggest points to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think if you see what their other options are, and anybody who was watching closely before the game last week would see that Alex Butterworth was doing some kicking, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily a great offense. As people on the staff have said, this is something that's going to have to be addressed through recruiting. I don't know that they're going to be able to spend a scholarship on a kicker, but they at least have to get a couple of talented walk-ons. Speaking of Sam Ficken, he's a Indiana guy, kind of a homecoming for him. Looking at Purdue, Adrian Amos talked about this being one of the most athletic offenses they've faced, maybe more athletic than Ohio State. I'm not quite so sure of it. I think he may be building things up a little bit, but Bill O'Brien talked about how good that defensive line is for Purdue, especially the tackles, and he's not building that up. Those guys are legit players.
Yeah, as for Amos building it up, it's probably not a terrible thing that in a game like this, it looks like a letdown spot. You kind of, the question was asked, are you worried about your guys matching their guys' intensity? And that's even a toss-up itself, is whether Purdue has any intensity. But yeah, I think it's probably a good thing that he's overselling it a little bit. I do think he's overselling it a little bit. Robert Marr, who's expected to start, has had some ACL injuries. I can't imagine quarterback. I can't imagine he's what you would call elusive at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe, but probably not. Skill-wise, yeah, I mean, they have some talented players, but in terms of the best they face all season, I'm not buying that at this point. We'll see Saturday.
Yeah, there was one line of questioning that I don't know that sometimes I scratch my head over things that are asked, with all due respect to questions, as O'Brien would say, that people have to ask questions. But, we heard it on the conference calls, and we heard it again today about how this is such a huge game for Purdue to maintain bowl eligibility. And, O'Brien, wisely said, well, every game's a bowl for us. Right. We don't have a bowl. We only have 4 games left. And, that makes complete sense. I really think that, I don't know that gives anybody an edge. This Purdue team has been so up and down. Talk about Danny Hope being on the proverbial hot seat, but I don't think that impacts anything in terms of motivation or intangibles or that sort of thing.
No, I wouldn't think so either. And it's simply, but you could argue both teams have a lot to motivate them, but you could also argue that they both cancel each other out. And really, I think Adrian Amos made the statement of the day in that regard. He believes it's easier to focus on the road because of the set, stringent routine they have. And I think that gives Penn State an edge up in this game, because you saw what they did when they went to Iowa. It was unbelievable. I mean, we haven't seen a start like that this season before that. It was just truly impressive. So if you're looking for an edge, I don't know how much of one it gives Penn State, but it certainly seems that they buy into what the coaches are having them do prior to games on the road.
Yeah, a couple things in wrapping up. I know everybody's concerned about the weather, and hopefully everybody's safe and getting back to normal out there in the areas where you're watching us. And if you have been struggling, our thoughts and prayers go out to you. Really has not impacted the Penn State football team at all, though. Not that should be anybody's primary concern. But with respect to the team, it's forced them to practice inside all week so far this week. This is Wednesday. By the time you watch this, they'll probably have practiced Wednesday. Bill O'Brien said they hope to at least do some stuff outside, because who knows what you're going to get out in Indiana. But again, really not a huge impact. And the players who were asked about it, Matt McGloin specifically from Scranton, said his family's fine and has not heard about issues with his family. The other thing, and we talked about it with John Urschel today, on the conference call early, like about 11 a.m. it would have been, and he talked about how one of the key things they brought out of the Ohio State game, he was still fine talking about Ohio State, was the communication between McGloin and the line and among the linemen themselves, and how that was an issue. Now, I don't against Ohio State because it was so loud. Now, I don't think that's going to be a big deal at Purdue, but I think that's something that they have to get down. They have to get all their little things down. Because going forward, when you're talking about Nebraska, when you're talking about being back here for Wisconsin late in the season, they're going to have to deal with that sort of noise, so they better get that all straight.
Yeah, I didn't really think it was all that loud on Penn State's offensive possessions, maybe here and there, but I found it interesting. I found it interesting that Matt McGloin specifically pointed that out, that they had to use a silent cadence when they were on offense at times because of the noise in the stadium. But it's something you have to get figured out quick, because you watch the tight end, or the false start penalties rather. One of them was a little iffy, and the other one was, there was 10 guys on a completely different snap count from what Stankovic was on. So I think that's something that it shouldn't be terribly hard to figure out. They seem like they've been pretty good with that type of thing all season. It's just a matter of getting it corrected for next week, or this week rather. But like you said, I think we, on the boards, 37,500 was what their associate athletic director is estimating. I asked Alan Robinson this morning, does their home crowd change anything for the way you guys prepare? And he said, no, not really, where you have to prepare for everything.
Yeah, Urschel basically said the same thing. I know you. Urschel basically said it doesn't matter if we're playing before 100,000 or none, that they have to kind of do things kind of the same way. So one last thing I almost forgot it. Neil Rudell, my fellow nitwit from the Altoona Mirror, asked Bill O'Brien about, he tried to carefully ask him about officiating and about do you have to get a kind of a clearer message for what's what, and O'Brien kind of tap danced around it a little bit, but he did admit that after the season he would like to be able to meet, whether it's with fellow coaches or the officials or whoever, to find out what constitutes certain penalties, and I'm assuming one of them would be offensive holding, and I'm assuming one of them would be defensive holding on a punt. With that said, anything else that jumped out at you?
No, I think that was pretty much it. I think that we'll get to see a little bit more of what these guys are doing to prepare. He said they've really focused on special teams, especially the return game. I think that'll be interesting to watch. And I also found it kind of humorous that Adrian Amos was asked pretty much point blank if he's been back there returning kicks, or if so, who, and he pretty much used a company line of, well, I can't tell you that. So I don't know if we'll see a different return man or men out there on Saturday at Purdue, but I think that's definitely one thing that jumped out, the fact that they're really focusing on that and trying to get it figured out, because it just hasn't been good enough in most cases.
Yeah, excuse me for my, I'm getting texts. I don't even know, I shouldn't turn this off before I get them. In closing, we usually just wrap up here, and we will do it. We look forward to seeing everybody next week after the Purdue game, wrapping up the Bill O'Brien press conference. But one of the funnier moments from today's press conference was when Matt McGloin showed up and answered a question about how his major, he's a journalism major, has helped him cope with the media. So we're gonna close on that note, let you see the answer to this question, because I think it's pretty funny. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Mark Brennan. This is Greg Pickel for Fight on State, and we will see you next week.
Well, you've obviously been through a lot here. How has your course of major helped you understand the media and working with the media and developing a thick skin? Has it helped, or?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I know, you guys pretend to be friends with me and everything like that, but no, I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, I'm definitely aware of how it works, and at the end of the day, I understand that you guys have a job to do, and you guys need to write what you see and what you feel, and I feel it's part of my job to help you guys write those stories and give you guys what you need, and I mean, I feel as if I've always done that in the past, and I've always given you guys some honest answers, and I've always told you guys the truth. So I mean, being in that, having that degree and dealing with you guys on a weekly basis, I definitely understand.